School violence. During the 2013-2014 school year, 65% of schools reported that one or more violent incidents took place. That's approximately 757,000 incidents. One of the most important aspects of dealing with school violence is being able to identify the signs that could potentially lead to violent acts. Early warning signs, common to those who commit violent acts at school. Social withdrawal, being picked on, poor academic performance with feelings of frustration, unworthiness, and chastisement, feelings of rejection, isolation, victim of violence, hitting, intimidating, bullying, or victims of this behavior. Expressions of violence, uncontrolled anger, and threats of violence. Imminent warning signs. Fighting with peers and family members, destruction of property and rage, threats of lethal violence, possession and or use of firearms, and threats of suicide.
When you are assessing the situation, it is important to avoid misperceptions about the prevalence and causes of school violence. It is critical to keep in mind that no single factor leads to violence. Multiple factors cause a person to become violent. In order to understand why violent incidents occur, you need to know school violence is not an epidemic. All shooters are not alike. School shooters often have difficulties. They are not always loners. Revenge is not always the motivation. Most attackers had previously used guns, but access to weapons is not the most significant risk factor. Unusual behaviors or interests does not make a student violent. Violence at school is rarely impulsive. Prior to most incidents, the attacker told someone. Most shooting incidents were not resolved by law enforcement. In many cases, other students were involved. In a number of cases, bullying played a key role. Prior to the incident, most attackers engaged in behavior that caused concern. The four-pronged assessment model considers all factors shaping the student's behavior and decision-making. Threat assessment done correctly entails personal history, relationships, recent life events, and coping styles. It is important to remember that you probably know less about the potential offender than you think. When assessing the student, make sure you look at their behavioral characteristics and their personality traits. Behavioral characteristics include capacity to cope, ways of dealing with anger, humiliation, sadness, disappointment, resiliency to failure, response to rules and authority, emotional empathy, and sense of self-importance. Personality traits include tolerance for frustration, coping skills, perceived injustices, signs of depression, self-perceptions, need for attention, and focus of blame. School dynamics also plays a role in a student's personality. For example, attachment to school, tolerance for disrespectful behavior, approach to discipline, flexibility, pecking order, code of silence, and supervision of computer access. Social dynamics is another important aspect. Things to consider: group relationships, use of drugs and alcohol, impact of media, entertainment, and technology, outside interests, and potential copycat effect of past incidents. Family dynamics also plays a role. How is their parent-child relationship? Attitudes, access to weapons, sense of connectedness, attitude toward parental authority, and is there any monitoring of TV, video games, or the internet? The goal of threat assessment is not only to keep schools safe, but also to help potential offenders overcome the underlying sources of their anger and hopelessness. The assessment process should have specific procedures in place, a referral component, as well as a method to follow up.
Interventions should be timely and supportive. What types of intervention does your school provide? Do you follow your school safety plan? Do you have a DASA officer? What about a non-discrimination procedure? Does your safety plan cover acts of violence? What else is needed to ensure your school is prepared? Can you answer these questions for your school? When you're looking for early prevention strategies, you need to look at modeling, therapy, counseling, after-school and community programs, empowerment programs, school restructuring. Modeling appropriate behavior should begin as soon as possible. Teachers and other mentors should always model appropriate behaviors. Some schools have adopted the PBIS model. There are many sources of negative influences, which need to be balanced with positive influences. An example of therapy would include reality therapy. Counseling has always been a positive intervention strategy. One of the best intervention strategies is after-school programs. Empowerment programs teach students to deal with situations in a positive manner. When schools assess their situation, they're able to plan and restructure if necessary. Your assessment may reveal that you need to add an SRO officer or develop a post-crisis team. In order to prepare for any incident, schools should make sure they have the resources necessary to start the recovery process. Your school should have access to on-site counseling services, to the countywide CISM team, and be knowledgeable of local grief groups in your community.
If you need to refer someone, there are a number of resources available on the local and national level for schools to access to ensure their district is ready for any violent school incident. The next couple of slides will give you information for internet resources. The best way to be prepared for school violence is to increase your awareness and be proactive.